Canada is easing trade tensions with the United States. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced today that his country is removing most of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. However, tariffs on U.S. vehicles, along with steel and aluminum, are staying put for now. I caught up with one of Michigan's
2025. In a boardroom high above downtown Houston, oil executives stare at a contract that once seemed guaranteed. A European energy buyer worth more than 4.2 billion United States dollars annually has just signed instead with Canada, locking in shipments of liquefied natural gas from terminals in Nova Scotia. The deal cuts straight through what used to be American dominance. At the same hour,
Friday's announcement marks a shift in U.S.-Canada trade relations after months of back and forth over tariff.
Precisely 9:15 a.m., farmers in Iowa watch international buyers walk away from wheat auctions. Their grain, marked up by new tariffs and higher transport costs, can no longer compete with Canadian exports sailing out of Vancouver. Across the border, in Toronto, another drama unfolds. A pharmaceutical giant announces it will relocate its research hub from New Jersey to Canada, citing transparent drug pricing and lower costs. Thousands of American jobs evaporate with a single press release. From energy to food, from medicine to the future of electric cars, the pattern is unmistakable. 5 American industries once thought untouchable are losing ground. And the beneficiary is not China, not Europe, but Canada. The question is no longer whether these industries can rebound. It is whether they can survive. But how did this happen? And which one will surprise you most? If you want to catch the full story as it unfolds, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what is coming next. By the year 2025, the ripple effects of protectionist policies have fully surfaced. What began as a strategy under President Donald Trump's administration, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and farm goods reaching more than 25%, has grown into a heavy weight carried by ordinary Americans. The government promised stronger industries. Instead, the United States is paying a higher bill at every corner of daily life. The numbers tell the story, but so do the lives behind them. Crude oil exports to Europe have dropped by nearly 18%, cutting into refinery jobs from Texas to Louisiana. In the Farm Belt, trade sales once worth more than 40 billion United States dollars each year have shrunk, forcing thousands of small producers to lay off workers or close entirely. Families who once relied on those jobs are now left searching for alternatives. At the supermarket, the shift is undeniable. A gallon of gasoline costs more than $4.80. Groceries are nearly 18% more expensive than in 2020, and prescription drugs remain out of reach for millions. While Canada wins contracts and attracts investment, American households face fewer choices and steeper prices. This is no longer only a trade dispute. It has become a quiet erosion of economic security for American families. And the industries most affected may surprise you. 1. Oil and gas. The oil and gas sector once symbolized American dominance. For decades, crude exports and liquefied natural gas shipments from Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska fueled not only global markets but also thousands of high-paying jobs. The United States believed it held an unbeatable advantage.
I'm announcing today that the Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSMA.
That picture has changed. By the year 2025, higher tariffs and shifting trade rules, first introduced under President Donald Trump's administration and maintained in various forms since, have made American shipments more expensive. Export volumes to Europe, once measured at more than 1.7 million barrels per day, have fallen by nearly 18% in just 3 years. The contracts did not disappear, they moved north. Canada expanded liquefied natural gas terminals in Nova Scotia and British Columbia, capturing long-term deals once signed with Houston refiners. For American workers, the consequences are immediate. In Port Arthur, Texas, a refinery that once employed more than 2,000 people has cut its workforce by nearly 1/4. Local diners that served shift workers now stand half empty. Families who relied on steady oil paychecks face mortgage pressures and shrinking household budgets. For consumers, the pressure shows up at the pump. Gasoline now costs more than $4.80 per gallon in most of the United States. In contrast, Canadian prices remain lower, helped by government-backed investment and smoother export flows. The result is a widening gap. Canadian households feel relief, while American families shoulder rising costs. This shift is not only about barrels and contracts, it is about credibility. International buyers see Canada as a stable partner, less entangled in political disputes, and willing to offer consistent pricing. The United States, trapped in its own cycle of tariffs and counter-tariffs, has become the riskier option. Oil and gas was once the bedrock of American trade power. Today, it stands as the first warning sign of a deeper transformation, one that touches farms, pharmacies, and even the future of electric vehicles. 2. Agriculture. Few industries reflect America's heartland more than agriculture. Wheat fields in Kansas, corn in Iowa, and dairy farms across Wisconsin once supplied not only American households, but also buyers across Asia and the Middle East. For decades, made in America, food carried both quality and reliability. By the year 2025, that reputation has begun to crack. Tariffs placed on agricultural products, at times rising beyond 25%, made American exports too costly in markets where price decides survival. International buyers turned instead to Canadian suppliers, whose grain and beef arrived tariff-free through trade agreements with Asia. Canadian wheat exports surged past 28 million metric tons, while American exports fell by nearly 12 billion United States dollars in value compared with just 3 years earlier. The U.S. government did not stand by quietly. Federal relief packages were announced, promising billions in subsidies to offset farmer losses. Politicians staged photo opportunities on family farms, declaring that American agriculture would remain the breadbasket of the world. But these measures could not reverse the math. Buyers in Tokyo, Seoul, and Jakarta signed contracts with Canada because the prices worked. Subsidies helped farmers survive the season but did not restore lost markets. For American families, the consequences are felt on both ends. In rural Iowa, a soybean farm that once exported to Japan has laid off half its seasonal workers. Without buyers, the eldest son sought construction work in Des Moines to keep the mortgage afloat. In cities, higher tariffs and disrupted supply chains pushed grocery prices upward. Beef now costs more than 20% higher than in the year 2020, forcing households to cut back on weekly meals. Meanwhile, Canada is thriving. Asian importers celebrate stable contracts, and Canadian farmers expand operations with new investment. The Canadian government highlights these wins as proof that open trade agreements bring prosperity. In contrast, American debates over tariffs have deepened political divides, with no clear roadmap forward. Agriculture, once the pride of the American Midwest, has become another arena where Canada's openness outmaneuvers America's protectionism. And the losses do not stop with food. The next battleground is even closer to the daily lives of American families, the medicine they depend on. 3. Pharmaceuticals. In the spring of 2025, a headline shook the healthcare industry. A European pharmaceutical giant announced it would relocate its North American research hub from New Jersey to Toronto. The decision was framed around one-issue: cost transparency. Canada offered predictable drug pricing and generous incentives for research. The United States, weighed down by political gridlock and high healthcare costs, could not compete. This was not an isolated case. Over the past 3 years, more than a dozen global drug makers have chosen Montreal and Toronto for their new laboratories. Canadian R&D investment has climbed above 10 billion United States dollars annually, while American spending growth stagnated. The shift is not just about labs and patents, it is about jobs. Thousands of high-paying research positions, once centered in Boston and New Jersey, are now filling offices north of the border. The United States government has tried to respond. Lawmakers held hearings, promising to cap drug prices and reform pharmaceutical regulation. A temporary credit program was launched to keep research in states like Massachusetts. But negotiations dragged on, lobbyists slowed progress, and results never reached the households who needed cheaper medicine. For ordinary Americans, the pain is direct. Prescription drug prices remain among the highest in the world. Families face monthly bills of more than 1,000 United States dollars for life-saving medications. In contrast, Canadians pay significantly less for the same treatments, thanks to national price controls and expanding domestic production. The result is a widening gap in both affordability and access. This divergence has a human face. In Ohio, a mother balancing 2 jobs admits she crosses the border once every 3 months to buy insulin in Canada at half the cost. Meanwhile, her local pharmacy stocks the same drug, but at a price she cannot sustain. Pharmaceuticals, once a cornerstone of American innovation, now symbolize an uncomfortable truth. When policy stalls, industry looks elsewhere. And Canada, with clear rules and competitive pricing, is becoming the preferred home for global medicine. 4. Electric vehicle batteries. By the middle of 2025, the race for electric vehicle dominance has shifted in an unexpected direction. For years, American automakers invested billions in factories across Michigan, Ohio, and Nevada, betting on a surge in demand for cleaner cars. But the core ingredient batteries has become Canada's trump card. Canada holds vast reserves of lithium, nickel, and cobalt. In recent years, government-backed mining projects in Quebec and Ontario secured long-term supply contracts with major automakers from Europe and Asia. As a result, battery production in Canada climbed to more than 100 gigawatt-hours annually, while American factories struggled with shortages and rising material costs. The shift is visible in the marketplace. A new electric vehicle in the United States now sells, on average, for more than $50,000 United States dollars, a price tag out of reach for many middle-class families. In Canada, production partnerships and subsidies have pushed down costs, giving consumers wider access to affordable models. The American government has tried to counter this trend. New tax credits were announced for domestic buyers, along with funding packages to encourage local mining. Yet, environmental disputes and political stalemates slowed approvals. While Washington argued, Canada built. For workers, the consequences cut deep. In Detroit, battery plant delays forced layoffs for more than 1,000 employees. A young technician, recently trained in high-tech assembly, described the feeling of being left behind as Canadian plants offered steady contracts to her former colleagues willing to move north. For ordinary drivers, the impact is equally stark. Families who hope to switch from gasoline to electric now face higher sticker prices and longer wait times. Meanwhile, Canada is exporting batteries not only to its own automakers but also to Germany, Japan, and South Korea, capturing supply chains that were once expected to anchor American leadership. The battery industry is not just about cars. It is about the future of energy security, national competitiveness, and everyday affordability. In this contest, Canada has seized momentum, while American policy debates leave its citizens paying more for the promise of tomorrow. And the competition does not stop with vehicles. The next front is even broader: the global push toward green energy. 5. Green energy. The final battleground is the most decisive of all: green energy. In the year 2025, global investors poured more than $50 billion United States dollars into Canadian hydro, wind, and green hydrogen projects. From the windswept coasts of Newfoundland to the rivers of British Columbia, Canada is positioning itself as a clean energy powerhouse. In the United States, the story is far less certain. Federal lawmakers promised a transition to renewable power. Tax credits were announced, and speeches celebrated the green future. Yet political gridlock stalled progress. Projects faced years of review, court battles, and shifting regulations. By the time approvals arrived, capital had already flowed across the border. The difference shows up on utility bills. In Ontario, households now benefit from hydro-powered electricity rates that are nearly 15% lower than 5 years earlier. In contrast, American families face rising costs. The average monthly electricity bill has climbed above 170 United States dollars, partly because renewable projects failed to scale quickly enough to replace aging fossil plants. For American workers, the opportunity gap is painful. A proposed wind farm in the Midwest promised thousands of jobs but collapsed after funding disputes. Meanwhile, in Quebec, a new green hydrogen hub is hiring engineers, construction crews, and long-term operators at a pace the U.S. market cannot match. The government response has been uneven. Emergency funding bills passed through Congress, but political divisions watered down implementation. State-level initiatives helped in pockets. California and Texas built solar capacity, yet the national picture remained fragmented. Citizens are left with higher energy costs and fewer job openings in what was supposed to be a sunrise sector. For Canada, the message is clear. By offering stability, streamlined approvals, and international cooperation, it has become the safe haven for investors betting on a carbon-neutral future. For the United States, the loss is measured not only in contracts and jobs, but in credibility as a global leader in innovation. From oil to agriculture, from medicine to batteries, and finally to green power, the pattern repeats. Canada is rising, and America's protectionist walls are turning into economic traps for its own people. 6. Conclusion. From oil and gas to agriculture, From pharmaceuticals to electric vehicle batteries, and finally to green energy, the story is unmistakable. Canada is not simply gaining ground. It is rewriting the balance of power in industries that once defined the American economy. Each shift began with government policy, tariffs, and political gridlock. But the true cost is now paid by American families at the gas pump, in the grocery aisle, at the pharmacy, and on their monthly utility bills. Jobs once promised as secure are slipping away. Farmers in Iowa, refinery workers in Texas, lab technicians in New Jersey, and engineers in Detroit all face the same reality. Decisions made in Washington have reshaped their future. Relief packages, subsidies, and tax credits have been announced, yet the momentum continues to flow north. Canada, with open trade, transparent pricing, and streamlined approvals, has become the trusted partner for global markets. This is not just a trade story. It is about everyday lives. The higher grocery bill, the medicine that costs twice as much, the car that feels out of reach. These are the quiet signals of a larger transformation already underway. So the question is clear. Which of these shifts do you believe will have the greatest impact in the next decade? Is it energy, food, medicine, or the technology shaping our future? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to be the first to know when the next wave hits, subscribe now and join us for the next chapter.